Hi, Karen.
Hello, Bev.
Oh, hello.
How's it going? Sorry,
Good.
you were stuck out in it, admit one land.
No worries at all. Now, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you fine.
Great. I've got a whiz-bang new microphone that I'm testing for my lectures.
Oh, nice.
I'll just see if I can. There it is. There's like this. Anyway, I better not play with it. I'll just leave it there, but it seems to be, the sound seems to be pretty good.
Decided that I wanted to fit my presentation and then it's not playing nice. We've got a new printer.
Oh,
I'm
sorry, what's that?
I'm here, but I'm just okay.
What do you reckon about the blurred background? You go blurred?
I go blurred, but I'm having a few problems. Like I seem to be having a little bit of an issue with my hang on a second, I'll just pause
Anyway,
this.
I'll leave you in peace. I'm here anyway, so.
Have you got access to the recording?
I was on mute. I should have access as a co-host, I think.
Yep.
I'm admitting into the room.
Hello, everybody. We're just getting a little bit organized here. Just give us a couple of seconds. Just want to start our process.
Nobody left in the waiting room. I think we're good to go when you are.
Yeah, we're good to go. Okay, there'll be a few more people turning up, so just like if you just admit as you go.
Yep, no problem.
And if you, I've just lost the recording button. Can you see it on yours? Because I'm sharing.
Yep, we're recording. All good.
Recording. Excellent.
Yep.
Okay. Welcome everybody to Ready to Teach Week. It's day 3. We're looking forward to a fabulous session today. It's titled How Much is Enough? And we're going to unpack that as we go through this session. So you've actually enrolled to go to Setting Up for a Successful Semester, but we're also kind of like moving into that space and thinking about what that actually means to you as a course coordinator. So I'd like to, hang on a second. I'm moving to, nope. I'm juggling 3 screens here and none of them are connecting very well at the moment. Okay, well, I'm just going to move on to acknowledgement of country. So the University of Queensland acknowledges the traditional owners and the custodian of the lands on which we're meeting today. We pay our respects to their ancestors and their descendants who continue cultural and spiritual connections to country. We recognise their valuable contributions to Australian and global society. And I'd also like to recognise that UQ has always been a place of people meeting to learn about many things. So I'd like to keep that in mind with our session today. Okay, I'm still having a small problem with my mouse. Are you right with that, put that person in, Shari? Yep. Okay, So today in our session, we've got 3 people today. My name's Karen Shepherd. I'm a learning design manager at Italy. And we've also got Bev Coulter, who's a senior lecturer at the School of Chemical Engineering. And we've got Shari Balkar, who's a learning designer from Italy, along for the session as well. I'm just going to sort this out so I can. Okay, we've sorted that out. Right. So what we're going to consider today is we're going to think about how you could make best use of your ECP, your LearnX site, your Blackboard site, and any other tools and platforms that you might actually come into play in your space. We're going to think about intentionally or purposefully designing your communication strategy and what that might look like for you. And we're going to think about your students' expectations and your expectations of them throughout the course or the life of your course. And we're also going to think about how you can ensure a good outcome for both you and your students as you go along. Now, there's a few caveats to that. And you probably come from a number of different schools and faculties. So believe me, UQ is a very large space and it has many, many different policies along the way. Well, it has single policies in the policy and policy library, but often those are interpreted in different ways across schools, degrees and faculties. So you're always advised to take whatever we talk about here, but also check in with your own space. So this session will provide a range of ideas. Please think about how they will work for you. Okay, so just to get us rolling here this afternoon, I want you to think about not so much who you are, because hopefully you know that, but why you're here. What are the benefits of good communication? Have you got a burning question? And is there something you specifically want to get out of this session? So can you jump into this Padlet link? And I've given you a QR code as well. Shari's going to post that
in the chat.
Chat in the
So
chat
grab it in the chat
for everybody. And you can jump in. And when you see the Padlet, it will look like my Padlet. Okay. Okay, so hopefully you can see my Padlet here.
We don't see your Padlet, Karen.
You don't see
You're
my
still sharing.
Padlet?
No, you're still sharing your slides.
Oh, sorry. Hang on a second. You share. Now can you see my Padlet?
We can see it.
Excellent. Okay. Along the way, I want you to kind of think about how you might set up some different communication strategies, and I'll try and flag a few things that have worked for different people across the way. So, and this is one particular one, the Padlet. So, if you can jump in to it using the link that Shari's posted in the chat, and see if you can add. So you can see my question there. My question is, what do you really want to know? And I've connected that up with communication. So if you can jump in and see is there anything that you would like to add to that? Okay. If you can't get in, just let us know. Pop it in chat.
So Karen, can I just ask an example? So if I wanted to know when ECPs are due, I could type my name and type the question and link it to all things ECPs. Is that what you would do?
Yes, please. Yes, yes.
Okay.
I see some people are joining us as we go. If you can't get into the Padlet, feel free to pop it into. Oh, okay. There you go. Thank you, Rachel. Blackboard timelines. Okay, we've got a few people popping in now. Any to be better? Okay, what I would like you to do is, as we go along through this today's session, if you can just add to that as we go, and we'll have a little bit of a Q&A at the end to see, to answer some of those questions. Okay, thank you, Julie. Okay, thank you for that. We'll keep on moving and get to the good stuff. Okay. Okay, so the first thing I want you to think about today is think about who are your students, and how are you going to? So I'm assuming many of you might be just starting off. It might be your first course coordination exercise. So it's always wise to kind of come through and think about who are you going to be teaching? Is it a large course? Is it a small course? Is it a course that is a mix of local and international students? What kind of diversity have you got in that group? Are they students that might be first up? Are they first year students? Are they third year students? Are they master's students? And considering what their interests are going to be and how you might like to teach them, because obviously first year students are going to be somewhat different from students who are in their fourth year. So there's a couple of places you can go to. There's the Course Insights dashboard, which offers advice, offers a way to understand who your students are. And I will give you this link, this PowerPoint after this session, so that you can look at these, explore these things on your own. So the dashboard offers a good way to find out who your students are. But I wanted to introduce Bev Coulter, who's actually a long time experienced, a very experienced course coordinator, and she also spends a lot of time working with her students quite closely. She organises. Are you the first year coordinator, Bev, or?
I'm the second year coordinator.
Second year coordinator. So
That's
okay, so you spend a lot of time bringing those chemical engineer students along on the story. So I just wanted to ask you, what kinds of strategies do you use when you're thinking about your students?
Yeah, look, I guess so. Yes, hello everyone. As Karen said, I'm a teaching focused academic in chemical engineering. I teach in our core chemical engineering courses, so typically 150 students in each course across second year, third year, and sometimes fourth year. So I guess at the start of the semester, I would go to Allocate and look at all my class lists and see who are in the tutorials that I'm running. I always bring up their student information, and I bring up typically their gender and their domestic international status. So I get a bit of a feel for, I mean, in our courses, they're just 1 year. So they're second years or third years. I like to know, yeah, whether international, domestic students, male, female. Maybe also we have in our school a number of majors that we run, 5 different majors. So in that Allocate information, you can see what sort of major the student might be in. So for chemical engineering, we've got 5 of those. So it's just sort of background information again. So for me, I guess that's the main thing. I as the advisor, I get to see a lot of these students during the semester and during the year. So I know many of them, but I think it's really just a matter of starting off with a bit of information. In my courses also, we do teamwork, so that's important. So when I form teams, I like to have diverse teams. So I think it's important to have a bit of information about the diversity up front. Yeah, look, I to be honest, I haven't used the dashboard a lot, the course insights dashboard, but I think that would be a really good idea too. I'll hand back to you, Karen.
Okay, thanks, Bev. So there's a number of different ways that you might, there are also a selection of other spaces that you might like to explore. So possibly there's a set of feedback around the place. If you think about CCATs, you might not be new. You might also have a background in, or you might have already taught the course before. You might have access to the course coordinators from the previous years. You've got school managers, a fountain of knowledge, and ask the questions. What worked? What didn't work? Why didn't it work? And what can possibly be done about it to fix it up? So be curious and think about what changes you might like to make. A bit of advice on the side there. Often people come in and they go, oh, well, I don't really want to teach my course like that. And that's well and good, but the advice from people who have been before you has been that you might consider making small changes in that first year before you go on to think about some wholesale changes, rather than thinking about like changing the whole thing completely. Incrementally seems to work a lot better for most people. Okay, so moving right along. So one of the key points that we like to think in regards to as you work through your course is to think about the ensuring consistency of communication in your communication with your students across the way. So just let me get back to my PowerPoint. Okay. So you have an electronic course profile that you work with. You've got a Learn at UQ or Blackboard course site. And you've got other places like Edge, a platform in edX, and other places like that. So my question to you is, which comes first? Which is the key mode of communication? Where's the first place that students go to? Can you hear me? Is that better, Christine? The very, very first place that people go to, the students go to. We've got Blackboard. Okay, thank you, Peter. They go to Blackboard, but it should be the course profile. Okay. Thank you, Peter. You're absolutely right. And I took this screenshot out last year about shout out to all the course coordinators who have already uploaded their ECPs. So the first place that students go to is the ECP. Just like, why do they go to the ECP, Bev?
Yeah, so I guess we take the process of drafting the ECPs very seriously in our school, and we draft it and then we have someone else review it. And I guess really we see it as a contract between the teaching staff and the students. So it has all the information that the students will need about the types of learning activities, the assessment items, the due dates, and it really is like a contract. And it's very important, I guess, to make sure that the information is accurate, and also that it is available. I think it's supposed to be the week before we start, so orientation week. So it's really the repository for all the information about the course that the students need to know.
Thanks, Bev. So basically the course design policy sits in the PPL, and if you haven't found your way there, it's a good way to, well, could be a good way to put yourself to sleep at night. But it also offers you another opportunity. It offers you kind of insight into exactly why the course profile is, that, as Bev calls it, a contract between you and your students and the students and the university. So if you pop along, there's a website that talks about the details that you need to include in your course profile. And there's a template, and that the acknowledgement that it is a single point of truth, okay? So now course profiles are possibly changing and moving into a new system, and that's slated for the beginning of semester 2, but not yet. So while that's going on, we're going to think about today how you might like to ensure that your course profile is very useful for you and for your students. There's an ECP, there's a link to organisation for them. So we're just going to go through a couple of suggestions around and a couple of hints around your ECP. Thinking about everything that you'll need to ensure good outcomes for your students and for your course team. Sure can, Lyd. We'll certainly add them to the chat site, but I will also share this PowerPoint so you'll be able to access that. Sarah's just finding them for you. So remembering that, so every course has an ECP, so 2 ECPs, 2 Blackboard sites. However, if you're teaching a master's program and say a second year program at the same time, course at the same time, you can request your Blackboard sites be merged. Don't forget it's a legal document, and it's also used for different universities in terms of RPL, so recognition of prior learning. Every student has access to the ECP, and you can access the ECP is accessed through your Blackboard site as well and sign it. Okay, so always a good idea to go through the ECP on your first contact with students. Keep a screen capture and think about other ways of highlighting the ECP. So when you start off, Bev, how do you manage that? Do you kind of point to it, or what does your first session look like?
Yeah, so in my first session, which is often a lecture, I will pull out the important parts from the ECP and put that into my slides. So, for example, the learning objectives for the course, that's very important to say, well, in this course, we're going to be looking at these things, and by the end of the course, you should be able to do these outcomes. I put the assessment summary as well. So I have the table with the assessment summary, which I actually put on Blackboard as well. But I think that's always good to show that to the students in the first week. This is the format of your assessments. This is the due dates. This is what they're worth. And then maybe I have a description of the types of learning activities that we're going to do, whether that's a tutorial or a workshop or a prac. So the students are aware of what's coming up for the semester. So, and then I say for more details, please read the ECP. So it's really important to read the ECP. And I think also in the welcome message that we all send out in, week 1 or O week, the standard form has a message to read the ECP. So I think that's really good as well, just so that we're reinforcing that it's an important document and we'd like the students to read it.
Nice, thank you. So the other important parts of this, and these are just kind of like helpful tips along the way. If you want a CCAT, that's a student experience of course and teaching. You need to make sure that if you're the course coordinator on your ECP, you're also listed as a lecturer underneath. Okay, so anybody that's lecturing and anybody that needs a CCAT, that's a student experience of course and teaching, then you will need to make sure that you are listed not only as the course coordinator, but also as a lecturer. You also might like to think about if you're going to put your tutors in there, are you going to put their emails in there as well? Or is the course coordinator's email going to be for everybody? And guest lecturers, while they can't get a CCAT, you can include them on them under the course profile. Okay, think about all the resources that the students are going to need. Don't assume that they know what they will need or that they will have it. The key point out of this one is that if students they will require a laptop, but there are means to provide that. So purchase arrangements and also borrowing from the library. So keep thinking about that. Thinking about the learning resources. Is there a standard school-wide section that's going to make a statement about that? Worth checking about this and discussing with your students. Other resources, do you need to go through what kinds of texts that they're going to use? How are they going to access the readings? Is there anything that the students should expect to do? Making sure that you keep the course schedule or the timetable in one space is really important because you can actually can be quite difficult for students if you start changing the schedule on the Blackboard site and not somewhere else, and then they've got the ECP. So the ECP remains the single point of truth. Okay, don't forget that you'll need to talk about all the activities that the students are going to take part in, and are you having is it an internal and external study modes? This kind of thing can be discussed in the first lecture. Don't forget that it's important that while these study modes may not necessarily be equal, but they have to be equitable. Okay, so if you've got a different assessment for people online or people in an external mode, you must make sure that that's suitably organised. Think about your assessments. Are you going to change your assessment schedule for any reason? Don't forget to include your due dates so that students can organise these things. And when assessments when they're first going to be made available. Okay, so keep that in mind. Are you having invigilated exams, non-invigilated exams? Are you take-home exams? Are you using Inspira? Identity verified assessments? All these things need to be included. You need to also include what your school's late submission policy is and the extension request policy. And you will note that you need to kind of tell students how they can apply for extensions. And you need to remember that you're not actually responsible for that. That's a school thing. And so you'll need to let the students know right from the beginning as to how how and when they can apply for an extension and where that happens. So that they should be able to find that online, and there's the information there that Sharia is going to post in the space. Just a quick question around that, Bev. When you how do you handle that? Because it's obviously a question that's often asked. How do you handle that with your students?
So a request for
A request for extensions and
yeah.
additions.
So quite often, I might get a direct email saying, I'm having a bit of trouble with something, or I need a bit more time. Can you give me an extension for this assignment? And then, so I usually reply email saying, look, I'm sorry to hear you're not so well, or, but to apply for an extension, you have to go through this process, which is the UQ application for an extension process. So even if it's a 5% item, I say, look, just fill out this, go through this process, and then it will come to me, and I will approve. Probably, I'll be fine to approve it. But yeah, I don't deal with anything myself. I always go through and that goes through our school admin team. So hopefully everyone's got a really good admin team. We've got a really good team, and they help us to manage the extension requests. But I certainly refer the student to the link, the UQ link, for applying for extensions.
Yeah, and I guess that's, I mean, again, that kind of like sends you back to that idea of good communication, but also making sure you know your school team, your school admin team as well.
Oh, definitely, that's right. And I think by giving every student who asks for an extension the same response, look, I can't approve the extension, but please apply here. And then it's very standard. There's no questions about what the procedure is.
Yeah. So the other question that students are strategic, let's not doubt that at all. And they kind of think of, well, if I don't have to complete all these assignments to pass the course, well, should I bother? So, but often people make sure that all the learning objectives or learning outcomes are achieved, they often put a hurdle in. So you might want to, if you're going to put a hurdle in, that's a pass-fail. If the students actually have to pass it, might need to think about that. Have you got any experience with hurdles? Have you got any hurdles in your courses?
Yes. So in my courses, I have the final exam as a hurdle. So students have to pass the final exam to pass the course. And then we also have a group project. So students must pass the group project to pass the course. So I guess they're the two largest assessment items for the course, and we make them both hurdles. But it really is at the discretion of the course coordinator. And I think it's really, if there's a piece of assessment that you really think everyone has to do, and it's a significant piece, and if they were to fail it, does that mean that they should really fail the course? I guess that's the question. If it's a smaller piece of assessment, I don't put hurdles.
Yeah, and I think that's excellent advice, because we've had cases of people who had like a 5% peer observation or a peer assessment exercise, which was a hurdle, and students hadn't, like 3 of their students didn't complete the exercise, and so they had to fail them. So yeah, so it's something to think about that. We talked a little bit about that. So think about how your lectures are going to be delivered to students. So is it going to be via Zoom? Are you going to be online, on campus? Is it some kind of hybrid? How will the students access the learning content? Think about maybe breaching copyright, and the library is a good place to go for that kind of information around copyright and recording online. So keep that in mind if that's something that you're going to do. Okay, so the current systems that exist in our learning spaces were updated in early 2021 in response to the fact that we were definitely sort of teaching in a hybrid mode. So often people were on campus, but they were mostly teaching to a cohort that was online. So when you go to, my advice here is making sure that you visit your room before you start teaching, understand the technology. We often know at the beginning of the year that some of the systems have been kind of either rebooted or not be rebooted, so it's worth making sure that you go in and check your learning space before you actually jump in there, before that actually your next start. So I guess the question here is, Bev, is that, so you've got your ECP, you've got your Blackboard, and you've got a multiple other set of platforms that you use in your course. So how do you manage that interaction?
Yeah, so I guess the main one for us is, that I use is Blackboard. So that's really and I say to the students, that's where I'm going to put just about all the information. So the information about what's happening week by week, the lecture slides, the lecture recordings, the assessment items. Really, I direct everyone to Blackboard. So I think the main thing I find is if I keep that really clear and clean, my Blackboard site, I think that really helps the students. And so they know where they're at. I arrange mine sort of week by week. So I have a weekly announcement. I have my lecture material and tutorial materials week by week. So it's sort of very clear. We also use the Ed discussion platform in our courses in chemical engineering. So that's accessible via the Blackboard site. So once again, I say to the students, go to the Blackboard site, and if you have a question, you can put it up on Ed discussion, and we'll look at that and we'll answer those questions for you. And similarly for the ECP, I direct the students, go via the Blackboard site and you can see the ECP. So I think really, for me, Blackboard is my main platform that I encourage everyone to look at and to use these other sources, ECP or Ed discussion, via Blackboard.
So what happens if, so you talked a little bit about this earlier about when a student comes to you about an extension. So what happens if a student comes to you, asks you about say for example, a question around assessment or things like that? So how do you manage that kind of individual communication with students?
Yeah, look, I think sometimes students do want to send emails to you, and I think that's absolutely fine. So often I sort of I might say to the students, if you have some questions, you can catch me after the lecture or catch me after class. Before or after class works well for me. I don't think we like to be sort of have dozens and dozens of emails coming through our in tray. So I think that's always, I'm cautious not to encourage lots of emails, but if I get a few, that's fine. But if I get an email that might have general content or a question that would be of interest to other students, I say, next time, please direct your question to the Ed platform, Ed discussion board, because it's probably useful for other students. And then, I can look at them all together. So I think that's something that's probably worth trying to encourage the students to post their questions on the Ed discussion board. Obviously, if it's a personal question or something that's related to just them and they'd rather do that via email, that's absolutely fine as well.
And it's a matter of equity too, I guess, in some ways.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. So exactly. And I think the Ed discussion board is very good for that, the information is available to everyone. And I think that's the best way to handle those general inquiries. If it's an individual or a personal inquiry, we can take that in person after class, or they can always arrange a meeting with me as well. So if I said, if you really want to discuss something, you can have a meeting with me. So please email me and we'll set up a time. So each week I would have a couple of hours, 2 or 3 hours set aside for student meetings.
Okay, so nice. Thank you. So I think I'm skip over that one for us now. So the other, as Bev was saying, your other space is your Learn at the UQ or Blackboard, depending on the Learn at UQ is the official term, but often people just call it Blackboard. So hang on, I've just asked you that one. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly trick through. Well, I'm just going to point to this set of slides. There is some UQ site design guidelines. Don't think about, go to them, have a look at them. They're about intentionally designing your Blackboard so that your students have better access and that they will be able to navigate the course. One of the key things that students often say is that I can't find my way around the Blackboard site because there's files here and files there. So think about intentionally designing your site so that your students and you are able to navigate it and use it, use it wisely. So does anybody, just want to pause here and just see, Shari, has there anybody got any questions in the chat around what's been happening so far? Or is there
No,
anything
nothing
on
in the chat.
Blackboard? Is there anything on the, Padlet that kind of pertains to Blackboard sites or?
Just quick look. Don't see anything on the Padlet either. Advice, somebody's looking for some advice sharing about what I should prepare for Blackboard.
What you should prepare for Blackboard?
Yeah, maybe you
So
need to unpack that a little bit more.
Yeah. So who was looking for advice? Can you just jump in, unmute, and just stop sharing for a second. Can you see who it was, Shari?
No, there's no name associated with it.
Okay.
It just has some advice / sharing about what I should prepare for Blackboard.
What you can prepare for Blackboard. Okay, so the Blackboard is setting it up as systems of files. When you go in there, there's lots of advice as to how you might do that. Hang on, I'll just go back and quickly share that again. And okay, so, and I'm really not going to go on about these, but there are many different sets of advice in the e-learning site that tells you talks you through how you're going to set it up and what works for you and your students. So you can keep going through. It's very nicely set up and it'll give you details, as you can see along here, how to set this up. And as I said, I'm not going to talk you through it. I'm just going to let you go in there at a later date and you can find all this information along the way. And I forgot about these links that have these little zoom ins. And we've got a question
So
there.
Karen, what you're sharing is what I just put into the site or into the chat as well, right? That's the e-learning guide.
That's
what
the
we're looking at?
e-learning guide. And it's a lovely guide. I mean, it served us well and if you think about the fact that for many years there was no standardization, and so it meant that it made a very interesting experience for students trying to navigate it. So if you work through this process, then your students will love you.
There's another question in the chat. It's probably a question for Bev, I imagine.
Yeah.
There's a question that says, do you publish all content week by week, or is it better to have all materials online at the beginning of semester?
Yeah, well, I prefer to go week by week or module by module. So, for example, if we've got a module that might last 2 or 3 weeks, I might put the learning resources up for that module. But I think if it's all up at the start of semester, it can be a little bit daunting for students and not particularly motivating. That's just my feeling. So I quite like the week by week or sometimes material for 2 weeks.
Okay, so that they kind of have that. Do you use Learning Pathway?
I don't. Some of my colleagues do. I'm sure it's a good tool to use as well, but I haven't.
Yeah. So the Learning Pathway sits at the top of the Blackboard site, and it tracks like week by week with links into different parts of Blackboard. And you can link it across to other things and resources and all sorts of things like that, can't you?
Yes. Yeah.
And look, I do think the students like the week by week. This is what we're doing this week. This is what we're going to learn. I think it really helps them to see where they're at, keep up to speed.
Okay, so I guess what we've been talking about over this last little while is, I mean, Blackboard is a mode of communication, ECP is a way of communication. And so my question is, and this is where we came in with the title, is how much is enough for students to you, you to your students, and thinking about how it is about managing expectations around what are your expectations and what are the students' expectations. Can you, now that's talking about, you mentioned using, and you've talked a little bit about before about a discussion board. Do you have and you talked about setting up expectations around the students. Do you actually have something like I mean, we've got some examples here of how do students communicate with you, or how do you communicate with your students? Have you got any recommendations? We've got a few here, but what works for you, Bev?
Yeah, so I guess once again at the start of semester, in probably the first lecture, I would say this is the expectations of us in terms of the teachers, from you, the students, in terms of communication, how we'd like that, and similarly, then we also have, this is what we will deliver, I guess, or aim to deliver in the course. But I think, I guess I'm not too prescriptive. I guess I'm try to sort of say, look, we will be available to help you, and we will. But I think in terms of the communication, the outgoing communication from me to the students, I guess probably one of the key messages I'd say is try and make it as clear as possible. And my announcements, for example, I have a weekly announcement up on Blackboard. I make that fairly brief, or as brief as I can, with all the information, but very clear. So what I'm trying to avoid is having lots of questions coming back saying, oh, what did you mean by this? Or can you explain that? So I think spending a little bit of time to make your messaging and your communication very clear saves you time, because no one wants to get bombarded with emails with points of clarification, because I think that's maybe a symptom that your communication is not very clear, not very direct. So I find students really respond nicely to a very clear, this is what we're doing this week, or if I do it the week before, and this is what you need to do in preparation, and just make it, as I said, very clear and simply. And similarly for the assessment items, this is what we're doing, this is what the brief is. So I think clear, concise communication is really important. And I think we do it up front at the start of semester, but I think we've got to keep on repeating those messages as we go through.
So, and that repetition obviously helps.
Yep.
Yes. Okay. So, I've heard of people have a regular Monday morning announcement. Do you do it randomly, or is it sort of like, have you got a set time?
Yeah, I usually do it the same day, probably Monday morning. If we have an early morning tutorial on Monday morning, I might send out the message on Friday afternoon to say, look, in preparation for next week, this is what we're doing, this is what you need to do. So barring an 8 o'clock Monday morning tutorial, I would typically send it on a Monday saying, this is what we're doing this week.
So do you call it a communication policy, or is it just a kind of just a slide that talks about how to?
Yeah, I don't say to the students I have a communication policy as such. I do talk about, clarity and conciseness of communication, because we talk about that in engineering as well as an essential professional skill. So I think I do sometimes couch some of these ideas of communication in a wider professional skill set. So the ability to learn how to communicate clearly and concisely is really important for everyone. That's for me and for you, the students. So practice that. But I don't call it a policy per se. So maybe not so prescriptive, but the general principles are fairly clear, I hope.
Now, I have heard of some course coordinators actually modelling the kind of emails that they would like to receive.
Yep.
So,
And some of
hey, you dude, what's happening?
Yep.
Is possibly not appropriate.
No, no, and I think that's right. Some of my colleagues give sample emails. This is what you, especially for the younger years. I think by third and fourth year, they've just about worked out how the UQ systems work. If we get sometimes, say, if we have international students coming in and they're starting in third year, they may not be aware of our expectations for communication. So I would probably, if they sent me an email like that, I might just email back and say, look, just to keep in mind that this is our preferred communication method, and we'd like your student name at the bottom, we'd like your student number, refer to me by my name. And it's just a sort of reminder, I guess. But I'd say the great majority of students in third year and beyond are really very good at that.
Okay, so the first years you would model the behaviour.
Yeah, I think
and
so.
you might
And maybe pick it up if it's a bit out of line.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good. Okay. So, and you talked about the welcome letter and things that you can do. That lots of people do letters, they do videos, they do podcasts even. And I guess particularly for your first year students, I guess you kind of lead them through the process a little bit.
Sorry, was that a question for me again?
Sorry, I'm sorry. Yes, it is. I'm just thinking.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about going back to the, like we talked about, who are your students, and I was
Yeah.
thinking about that kind of concept of that communication, just setting it up quite carefully, because students are coming from all sorts of places from when they first arrive in the first year. So yeah, I was just thinking about
And look,
that.
I think a welcome message or video is great. I would make the point that lots of people do things differently, like different teachers do things differently. And I think that's part of finding your own style and what you feel comfortable with as a teacher. But I think sort of setting sort of standards, this is what we expect, this is how we like you to communicate, it is really important. And I think from a professional point of view, we're starting to model some of those behaviours that our employers would expect our graduates to use in the workplace as well.
So I like that connection, and it sounds and particularly I know in engineering there is like a deep connection with industry along the
Definitely,
way.
yeah. And it's and I think we're definitely training our students for the workplace. So I would often say, well, look, when I communicate with people in the workplace, this is when I was working in industry, this is what I'd had to do. So I think this is part of, we're learning those skills now.
Okay, so sorry, I've just plugged my computer in and it's just had a little connection. So just while I find my way back to my slides, can you just talk to me a little bit about what actually works for you, Bev? Now we've combined a bunch of things, and I've just jumped ahead a few slides. Here we go. So, Bev, in your combination, kind of, if I asked you to sum up the kinds of things that works for you along the way, and there's quite a few recommendations that you've made and I've made. How would if I was going to ask you to summarize it all, can you kind of put that together for me?
Yeah, maybe we could go to that next slide that had the 4 tiles.
Sure.
I mean, yeah, thank you. Yeah. And you could even put them, yeah, thank you. That would be great.
Yeah.
So I guess these are some notes that that I pulled together for a session we had in our school in 2021. Just some of the tips that I'm coordinating, because I think I would argue that the skills you need as a coordinator are a bit different to the skills you need as a teacher. They're not completely different, but I think you've got the teaching skills, and then on top of that, you've got the coordination skills, which I think are really important. And to keep your course running well throughout the semester, it does take a lot of sort of organisation and focus. So I guess if we have a quick look at some of these student interactions, respectful, friendly manner, sort of clear, regular communication via weekly announcements, timely feedback for assessments. I don't know if we need to go through all of these points because it'd probably take too long, but I think it's getting back to that idea of making the communication clear and concise with the students. The last point there, the human approach, using names of students where you can. I can't remember everyone's names. If we've got a class of 150, I just can't, but I will definitely use names when I can, and maybe introducing humour as well where it's appropriate. I think the other thing for the coordinators is the teaching team. So most of us will have tutors working with us, and to manage that team of tutors so that they can be, your really great help. And there's nothing like a really good tutor team to lift the whole course. And I think our students really appreciate that. And I think valuing the tutors is really important. Having check-ins with them along the way. Sometimes we have a coffee meeting, maybe mid-semester, at the end of semester.
So sorry, I was just thinking about tutors and
Yep.
the importance of kind of, because they are often your first, really, they're often the ones that the students recognise or remember, or
Definitely.
they're the face of your course often, really.
Yep. Oh, definitely. And because they're often have done the course maybe themselves, or they're close in age to the students really appreciate good tutors. So for us as a coordinator or coordinators, to value that and to guide the tutors is really, I think, really beneficial for everyone. Maybe the course content, I think probably not necessarily to go through that at the moment, but once again, clear, simple explanation of key concepts. Maybe I just will highlight that first point, linking to the bigger picture, industrial practice and professional skills. I think that really helps with the students' motivation if we say we're doing this, because when you go out to work as an engineer in the field or in industry, you will need these skills. So we really have to practice them now and develop them here while we're at university. So I think that really helps. I like to bring in guest lectures to, once again, to bring out that outside perspective. So it's not just me talking, it's kind of, this is what we think is important, and that's backed up by some of our other partners. And then maybe just a little bit about assessment, which I guess is the domain of the course coordinator. I think this is a really tough one. Getting this right, it's hard. Is it fair? Is it clear? Is it testing all the learning outcomes that we want to develop? Is it interesting? That would be really nice if all our assessment can be actually interesting as well. Are our rubrics nice and clear and simple? So aiming for simple, clear rubrics that are useful for the students, or good for the students and good for the staff as well, the marking of tutors. And then, the briefs up on Blackboard. Once again, I guess there is a bit of a theme here of clear, consistent communication. So it's up on Blackboard. We know the students know what they have to do, and it's clear. And if there's anything that's unclear, and that often happens, you sort of put something up and you think, oh, that's not very clear. Students might ask, and if there's a few questions, I'll then just put a clarifying comment, or just to make sure that everyone's, I might need to clarify a point I've made.
Nice.
So
now, I'm aware that you have to run to another very important meeting. So has anybody got any quick questions? Are there any questions in the chat, or hang on. If there's any questions in the chat, can you, or any questions in the chat, Shari, or is there any questions that out there that people might like to talk to ask Bev before she runs away?
So from Peter, do I try and keep a single mode of communication? So I think I said the Blackboard site would be my preferred communication channel. And then but then we've got the Ed discussion board as well. So I guess, and then I've got email. So I guess on a daily basis, I would be looking at the Blackboard site, the Ed discussion board, and then emails. But I certainly prefer the communication to be more broadcast in style. So I'm not sending out lots and lots of individual emails, which, as we know, takes so much time. And I think maybe this is getting back to the title of our talk, how much is enough? I think the other point I'd maybe just like to say too is that, we don't want to wish away the semester and hope that week 13 rolls around really fast. Teaching can be lots of fun. And if we can enjoy it along this away as we're going through the semester week by week and feeling like that we're keeping, the wheels are still on the cart, that's great. And not getting bombarded with lots and lots of individual email questions. And students don't check their emails just very regularly. I think that's very true. So I think Blackboard is a good place for the announcements. They seem to read the announcements up on Blackboard. Most students do that as well. Yes, definitely.
And you can respond to them in the same site as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
In a broadcast sort of way. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Bev, for popping in, and I'll let you go to your lovely school review meeting.
All right. Okay. All right.
Thanks
Thanks for having me. Thanks, Karen. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Okay. Just right. Okay. So I wanted to kind of spend this last little bit of time just with you to think about how you might what kinds of questions you might have had, thinking about what the kinds of things or the kinds of protocols and processes that Bev puts into place. Now, again, go back to the original comment at the beginning of the session where we said, you don't have to do it this way. This is one way, but you need to do it the way that works for you. So does anybody have any kind of questions around how they're going to set up for their semester and what they think might work for them, or what experiences have they got so far? So Peter, you're sitting right beside me, and I'm just wondering if you have any questions, or have you got anything to say about your experience so far?
I went to one of the sessions the other day where Gwen Laurie talked about having something during O Week, just to start orientating students to that. And I guess it's not always possible. So I've been thinking about the idea of videos at the start. And the real thing that I've been thinking about is we do a lot of studio-based teaching, which means the learning process or the pedagogy is very different to what most students are used to. So it's not the standard learn in the lecture and then go and do problems. A lot of the learning happens in a studio environment. So I've been thinking that it might be useful, and we try and do a little bit in the ECP, but I think something like a video at the start, this is how you will learn in this course. So that's something which has been, I guess, bubbling around in my mind for a bit.
And I think that would be a great way to kind of cue your students into, what their expectations or meeting their expectations. It also provides a clarification for them, and maybe just making them feel welcome. So is there any other questions? Thank you, Peter. Has there any other questions along the way that we haven't answered? And sorry, actually, you're very quiet.
Am I quiet?
Maybe even more quieter than me.
No. Oh, maybe my headphones aren't working. Oh, one sec.
Do you want to share the Padlet? While Shari's doing that, is there any other questions? Hang on a second. I'll just find that. Do you want to share that Padlet for me, Shari? My screens have... Or just read the question out. There we go. Okay, so Jamie, yes. In answer to your question, we will provide you with the slides plus there will be a recording in like a few days, not right now, but in a few days' time, that you'll be able to access and answer questions. Now we've still got another 16 minutes, but is there anybody that wants to stay online, jump in, offer a, Julia asked how she can engage her students better. If you're asking that question, so I'm here in this little Zoom, and I'm looking at a group of tiles, and I get the picture. It's actually really hard if there's nobody there in the room, or it's very hard to see people's faces. In terms of engaging them better, I mean, I think, is it Julia, is it face-to-face? Are you face-to-face in a lecture circumstances? Where are you? There you are. Hello, Julia.
Yeah, face-to-face classes, but I meant generally because in my experience, like it's my first semester coordinating, but I've been teaching for a couple of years. During mid-semester, a lot of students just stop engaging with content, stop attending classes, don't check their emails. And then in the end, of course, they have all these problems like, I didn't know what to do. Why did I fail? What can I do in week 13 because I had problem with my team and no one participated during semester.
Okay, so there's a number of different ways you can try. I mean, I suppose it's partly about what we were talking about before and setting up those expectations right from the beginning around what you're expecting them to do to pass, I suppose. So and unfortunately, assessment drives learning. So maybe it's around making sure that your assessment processes are kind of maybe staggered through the semester, and that your sessions involved, there's a lot of active learning tools that you can use, quizzes, polls, and within the email, within the PowerPoint session, there's a number of different links to the e-learning site that talks about active learning engagement opportunities. There's a different processes. As I said, I think for me, polls work really well. But I think that what people have discovered is kind of not continuous assessment, but the opportunity for formative assessment throughout the course, because students they want to be successful. And so if you put points in along the way where they have to prove that they're being successful, I suppose is a way to do it. You obviously can't, in tutorials, you can't actually give them marks for turning up, unfortunately. But there's a group of, as I said, try some of those links in the PowerPoint, and they will take you to different modes and different ways to think about keeping your students engaged. Is there anybody in the group that's got any hot tips that they have kind of used over the years or just recently?
I don't know that this is a hot tip, kind of two things, but is it okay for us to accept that there will always be a small proportion of students who just won't engage? And maybe, like, for example, I was using the Course Insights tool, checking for people who hadn't been in for a period of time and emailing some students just to, are you okay? Is everything going okay? Is there anything I can help you with? But even when you do that sort of stuff, there always seems to be a small proportion who will just not engage. Maybe not until week 13 or something like that. Is that okay? Like, you do what you can, but there's always going to be a proportion.
I think you have to, accepting that, I think is probably how much is enough in answer to your question, that kind of acceptance is that you won't be able to follow them through. Everybody's over 18. We are dealing with people who are, involved and enrolling. So I think in that respect that there's a sense of responsibility, I suppose. And we talked earlier about setting up expectations, and that's, that students will engage with you as part of the process, I think is part of that exercise. So yes, sometimes you have to say, yes, I've done enough.
One thing as a tip, which I found kind of was useful and helped across the semester, was I would set up a time where people could just come and chat with me. And often that wouldn't be in my office, that would be somewhere on campus where they could just, for example, I will be at the coffee shop at this time. If you want to talk about anything, just come and say hello. And that worked. Initially in the start of semester, it wasn't kind of super popular, but certainly towards the end of semester, a lot of people came, and some people would just come to just listen to what other questions people asked.
And I think you're right that kind of availability, I think, is part of that process. You're setting up almost like a social contract, I suppose, where you give them the opportunity, and if they don't come, then the ones that came, I probably obviously learnt a lot. Can you talk a little bit more about how you use, like, the Course Insights facility allows you to filter across your students, the ones that are, so for example, if you get out an assignment and you had a whole bunch of people who got 7s, you can email them and say, congratulations, you nailed that assignment. But you can also say the people who got 4s or 3s, you can also say, hey, I noticed you weren't that successful. What can we do to help? Or here's some places you can go to help. So did you obviously use that, Peter?
Yeah, I didn't do that, but certainly I was watching for people who were starting to not engage with Blackboard in particular. But at the start of the semester, I used, I guess, just the statistics to say, who are we as a group? We're a mixture of these different types of people, and we're coming from here and all that sort of stuff, which I think was a good acknowledgement that people saw that I was, I guess, recognizing them in the cohort. And it was something that I guess I tried to really tap into as much as possible, because I was looking for people with different perspectives to talk about things, and it opened up discussion quite a bit, because part of what we did in the course was actually talk about the ethical responsibility of technology designers and developers and that sort of stuff. And so it was useful to have that. But also part of that was getting them, when they were designing technology, to think about, they're designing for a very different, I guess, more broad population, rather than someone who sat within their own experience. But I think that the thing that was most useful was, as I saw people not engaging for a period of time, that email to them, that was really, I tried to keep it as a very simple approach, as in, are you okay? Not a, you haven't been engaging kind of thing. It's like, is everything okay? Is there something I can help you with? And from that, there were 3 students I can think of where things weren't okay, but I was able to kind of help them, bring them back in to the course. And I felt that was quite useful.
Okay. So what you're saying, you were able to tap into that kind of the wall that exists, often in an online situation, or and gave them a space to have a voice, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely. And a way that they felt that it was okay to communicate with me if they were having issues, because, life happens. And so I think sometimes you've got to, we're not counsellors, but we can refer. Maybe you need to talk to student services. Maybe you need to go here, but also maybe you need to apply for an extension now because this is going on in the lab.
Yeah. And so, as you say, there are many, many services across them. Don't underestimate the fact that your students might not know about the different services that are available around the place. And you talked about going to student advisors. We talked earlier about seeking extensions. That possibly, if people do get into trouble or do get behind, that they need to put their hand up and go, hey, I'm struggling here, type thing. So, and that's the thing that you, as a course coordinator, can kind of send them to different places. Okay, there's student advisors, there are different spaces. Hang on, just off the top of my head, we can go to the ones that provide services like, teaching essays and things like that. But there's also the ones that kind of deal with it if there's other issues in work-life balance and things around the place.
Yeah, very much so. The other
So-
thing I did on a regular basis was, in fact, it was every week. So I would turn up to my lecture 10 to 15 minutes early. And quite often the students are sitting around outside and just going and sitting with them, you know, how are you going, that sort of stuff. It really changed the atmosphere a bit, I think, where they felt it was okay to ask questions and it was okay to talk about things.
Okay. So I think, you know, like you're talking about making yourself accessible and not hiding behind the lectern or standing behind the lectern. So thank you. Is there anybody else out there? Now, while I've still got a few of you in the room, Sherry, we also were looking for feedback on any of our sessions. So Sherry's going to post a link in the chat before you run away. It's 2 questions. So it's like a 3-minute exercise. Well, it depends on how much you write. Can you, while we're just finishing off, can you possibly jump in there and, oh, there it goes.
So you can all see that on your screen. I don't see it on my screen because I've launched it. Yeah, there should be 2 questions there. So if you have take a minute and answer those 2 questions, that's really helpful for us going forward. I've seen Karen do a few of these sessions, and every year it evolves a little, you know, trying to take an account of what's going on in the university and the changes, and, you know, it's constantly shifting. And as we get more information and more systems, you know, we didn't have Course Insights a few years ago, and, you know, it's always changing. So yeah, take a second. That would be great.
And while you're filling out that, is there any other questions or ideas that you want to promote, or things you want to say? You can pop a question in the chat. Okay, well, I won't hold you up for any longer. Thank you very much for jumping in and talking to us this afternoon. Good luck with, don't forget, there's lots of spaces that you can go to, and there's the link at the end of the PowerPoint. There's a group of a whole bunch of links that you can go to set yourself up, and hopefully you will have a great semester. You can book an appointment where you can spend an hour with a learning designer, with an e-learning designer. If you want support setting up your Blackboard sites, if you want support setting up your ECPs, there is a space where you can book into that, and you can spend an hour with somebody, and then book another appointment the week afterwards. So there is a lot of generosity. There's a lot of spaces there that you can check in with us. Don't forget, or just email italy@uq.edu.au, and somebody will get back to you. So if there's no more questions or problems, okay, we'll leave you. Have a great day, and thanks for popping in. Thanks, Peter. Nice to meet you.
Thanks, everybody.